All right. So the next news story. Hey, guess what? It has a difficult name in the first line of the article. So, pre-warning: if I butcher your name, I apologize. But Beetlejuice 2 is being pushed forward with a new writer at Warner Brothers. For those of you guys who do not know, Beetlejuice was directed by Tim Burton in 1988 and became a cult favorite. It was re-released in two theaters in Los Angeles now. But Mike Vukadinovic, sorry, the
Vukan
burp is not a part of the
Ivanovich.
name. Yeah, Vukadinovic will rewrite Beetlejuice 2 for Warner Brothers, a project that will be that has been gestating and has been a repairing of Tim Burton and Michael Keaton. Although I guess they are both working on a Dumbo movie at Disney. So they're that's their repairing, I guess, but not in the classic sense. The cool thing with this is I look at, because the article gives, what Vukadinovic, he's done a movie called Rememory, a science fiction drama that premiered at Sundance earlier this year and is required by Lionsgate. And this is the movie that stars Peter Dinklage and Julie
Ormond.
which Ormond, sorry. Wow, I get Vukadinovic his name right and I butcher hers. Wow, how does
You're
that work?
you're just assuming you got his name right. I know
Oh,
Julia Ormond's name, how it's
yeah.
pronounced, so that's why
Oh,
I'm giving that to you.
but it's which I've seen a lot. I've seen some trailers for it. I'm like, that looks really good, and I've even seen it at my store. I just haven't bought it yet. I don't know. So, what do you think about this? Because to be honest, this was released a year before I was born. And for
Uh,
those of you guys who had an hour in, this is where I made Corey feel old.
yeah, I've been struggling. Anyways, last night we had Anthony Rouse on as our guest on Podcast of Terror. He is 22 and he is a filmmaker and he just works his ass off and is prolific, just making stuff all the time, and made Matt feel old, which just made me look like Alec Baldwin and Gina Davis at the end of Beetlejuice when they're turning to dust in front of everybody. How do I feel about this? Beetlejuice is a beloved classic for me. And we're talking about something that really launched the career of Winona Ryder,
Mm-hmm.
was considered the first breakout hit for Tim Burton, even though he had done Pee-wee's Big Adventure before that and was a spectacular movie in its own right. But people always think about Pee-wee's Big Adventure as Paul Rubin's Pee-wee Herman thing, not as much about Tim Burton's thing. This was when we got Tim Burton and we started to see who Tim Burton really was as a filmmaker and got his aesthetic and everything going forward and where we're going to go with Edward Scissorhands, your favorite horror movie, and Batman, which utilized Michael Keaton. This was also a big launch for Michael Keaton, not in the fact that he hadn't been in movies before and wasn't already become a big, well-known actor, but when we got to see him do something completely outside the realm of what we had been seeing before. He was doing very good comedies. I loved him. The first time I saw him was in a movie called Night Shift with
Mm-hmm.
Shelley Long and then Fonzie. And then he was in Mr. Mom and a couple other things, Gung Ho, I think. But when we got to Beetlejuice, it's like he was unrecognizable from himself. He was playing this character fully immersed into it. And we're like, oh, wow, shit, Michael Keaton could do something very, very different. And so when it came up after that he was doing Batman, the same sort of thing of, oh, shit, I would have never thought of Michael Keaton as Batman. It doesn't work in the conscious mind, but when you take a step back and you look at it, and it's like, oh, but it could work. He can do it. It meant he was more capable than what we had seen. And so in a lot of ways, this movie is one of those things that you don't want to see get fucked up. Like you don't want to see them wreck Ghostbusters by doing a relaunch of it with people who weren't the original Ghostbusters. And you can make your arguments that it wasn't the actresses, and I agree that it wasn't the actresses. The actresses are all very capable in many other things. but because it wasn't the Ghostbusters that we recognized, and on top of that, I don't think it was the funniest movie in the world, it needed to be to win the audience over. When you do something that's so many years later, it's always a crapshoot of if that audience, the original audience, is going to return. And if they return strictly for the nostalgia, do you only give them a nostalgic film, or do you give them a new film that's going to cover new ground and new territory? And which is the better option, really? Because if it's nostalgia for nostalgia's sake, it's kind of cheap. You feel kind of cheapened out. It's like, oh, you're just doing the same beats over again. And here's the young girl that's replacing Lydia. Maybe it's Lydia's daughter. Maybe we get Winona Ryder back for this. Or the ghosts are all still living in the house. What do we do? I don't imagine that Jeffrey Jones is going to come back from this. He's probably not allowed around children. But there's so many things that, what is the story going to be? Who is it going to involve? Is it just Beetlejuice himself in a whole new situation? And that's up to the screenwriter and the director and everything. Again, it's hard to say at this point without knowing anything other than the fact that they're hoping to do a Beetlejuice 2. I certainly think Michael Keaton can pull it off.
Yeah.
Whatever it is. He seems up for any role at this point.
Yeah. I mean, it's which is cool. I mean, also I should point out that Seth Grahame-Smith and David Katzenberg of Cat Smith Productions will produce this. All in all, I think this is pretty cool. And we should also point out that this, much like the article about the Deathstroke movie, there are no deals set for Tim Burton or Michael Keaton yet, so they haven't signed anything. Same thing with Joe Manganiello and the director. I'm blanking on his name because I closed the tab. I don't know. I just feel like this was an interesting story to have in here because you get.
It's your what if. It's your what if situation. It's man, I love Beetlejuice. I wish we had gotten more Beetlejuice. Other than the cartoon was actually really good too.
Yeah.
Oh man, if we had gotten a Beetlejuice 2 20 years ago, who knows? Because we got a Ghostbusters 2, and people will tell you, and they'd be right. Ghostbusters 2 was not a good movie, especially as a follow-up to Ghostbusters. But in hindsight, I love Ghostbusters 2 because it was the sequel to Ghostbusters, and it had the whole team back together, and it had its moments.
I guess this sort of brings up an interesting question that we're sort of going around here. Can a movie, show, property that's reached cult status, can it come back and do better than what it originally did?
It depends on the goodwill. It depends on the goodwill of the audience and how they feel about you. For instance, we just had our 5th Pirates of the Caribbean movie. Now, those first 3 Pirates movies did amazing. The 4th one came out, and I don't think anybody even remembers what it's about. It just didn't have Will and Keira Knightley's character. I can't think of her name. But Elizabeth, thank you. And the 5th one came out
playing the Lego game.
Yeah. And the 5th one came out and did nothing. But if the goodwill had still been there for the creators, and I think Johnny Depp is not in a place where people are really loving Johnny Depp right now, maybe it could have done better. You look at Twin Peaks, the revival on Showtime, and even though it was nothing like the original Twin Peaks TV series, it had far more in common with the Twin Peaks movie and was, just let's face it, purely David Lynch. It was Lynch at his Lynchiest. People were super excited for it. Now, I think some people went away disappointed because they liked the show. I liked the show. I liked the books based off the show. I liked the soap opera silliness. So I'm not sure how I'm going to react to the new series yet. I still haven't watched it. I'm waiting to get to that. But some people loved it because of the art and because it did give us a follow-up to characters that we love, like Dale Cooper.
Yeah.
And it was a payoff for something that we'd waited 20 years for. And that's great. So it really depends on how do you earn the trust of the people to get them to want to come back. I think we've seen that Michael Keaton is blowing up in Hollywood again ever since Birdman. He's doing more and more interesting parts. He's doing stuff that aren't as well known as Birdman in the drama categories, but people are excited to see him back up on the screen. And I think that we are certain that he can give us good stuff. Tim Burton's a little bit more of a crapshoot because, one, he works a lot with Johnny Depp, and got a little too enamored of doing movies with him and his now ex-wife, Helena Bonham Carter. But sometimes he does okay, but he really got into doing the same kind of look of things for a while, of the Alice in Wonderland movie and a bunch of other stuff. We watched his Miss Peregrine's School for
Peculiar
whatever.
Children.
Yeah. And it seemed like it was all artsy and no story. So it's kind of 50-50 on this for me.
Yeah.
And where it's going to, I think, land in the positive is because, again, Beetlejuice is very, very beloved, but where it can land in the negative is, that's not my Beetlejuice. There's no Lydia. There's no Gina Davis and Alec Baldwin in the attic. What is this? Why do they even do that movie? So you really have to walk a line, and then it becomes a Star Wars. Not what is the first one of the new movies?
Rogue One, or
not Rogue One.
Force Awakens.
Force Awakens. Yeah, it's a Star Wars Force Awakens situation where it tells the same story to a certain degree, and people are going to complain, oh, they're just repeating themselves. They're just giving us episode 4 over again. But at the same time, it was hugely successful because they gave us episode 4 over again. And remember how great episode 4 was when we first saw it? What they didn't give us was the prequels. And so thank you for that. I don't know. It's so early. It's hard to say. As I keep seeing Peter Dinklage's name in the article, I really want to see Peter Dinklage in the movie. Like maybe it's the new Otho. That would be tremendous. I think Peter Dinklage is somebody who should be in a Beetlejuice film anyways.
For more on this Galactic Network podcast, go to gncast.com. That's GNCASTS.com.